and welcome to My Security TV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Coverage. I'm the Executive Editor with My Security Media, and today we're joined by Alexander Yampolsky, who is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder with SecurityScorecard, and he's joining us from the US, and we'll welcome Alexander now. Alex, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. And where are you calling in from again?
So SecurityScorecard is headquartered in New York, but we're global and we're international. We operate in over 49 different countries.
Very good. Now, SecurityScorecard, and we've got this title here, Security Ratings Demystified. I think that pretty much sums it up. I like it when the company name kind of explains the company. I think most of us in the industry will get it. But it is looking at things like the metrics, and it's a SaaS model as well. So there's a lot to sort of unpack here. You're also the co-founder, so we're going to have a little bit of a chat about being a startup as well, which is also a challenge. You've been going since the mid-2000s. Maybe just talk us through the startup to the company, and then exactly what your focus is at the moment.
Sure. So I started the company in 2014. I've been a CTO and a Chief Security Officer working for companies like Oracle, Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, Guild Group. And when I was a Chief Security Officer, I invested a lot of money into all kinds of tools, vulnerability scanners, penetration tests, security audits. Yet I always had no idea, am I becoming safer? Am I becoming stagnant? Am I staying in the same spot? I never knew how to really measure and quantify risk. If I invested $10 million into the latest and greatest endpoint security technology, I know that I spent $10 million, but did they become 5% safer, 2% safer, 10% safer? And so the idea that I had is that if you drive a car, you have a speedometer showing to you how fast you're going. If you buy a bond, you have credit ratings from S&P or Fitch. But when you operate in cybersecurity world, you have no KPIs, you have no metrics. Yep. And so the idea that we had is that there has to be a way to measure and quantify security from outside. And so we invented SecurityScorecard, where we pick up signals from hundreds and hundreds of different locations, and we rate any company in the world, give it a score, A, B, C, D, F, and then we give analytics to companies explaining to them how they can become safer and how they can become more resilient.
Now, part of this sort of background, you mentioned you were a CISO and you were reporting to your CEO and your board, and they weren't too sure how good a job you were doing, I suppose. And that was really the crux of what you're saying here, isn't it? That rating is not necessarily for the CISO and for the security teams. It's more for the people you're reporting to and running the business. That's where the secret really comes from these types of companies.
Yeah, when I started as a Chief Security Officer at Guild Group, 3 months into my tenure, I received an email from a chairman of a board who said, Alex, I'd like you to come and present to me how we're doing on cybersecurity. And so I put up this elaborate PowerPoint deck where I talked about the controls I put in place, the people I hired, the risks I discovered. I walk into the office. He starts flipping through the deck out of sequence, looks at me and says, I don't think you're doing a good job. And I was shocked. I'm like, what do you mean? Look at all the progress I made. Look at all the people I hired. How am I not doing a good job? And his response was that he didn't hear enough people complain about me as a CISO. If I was making enough changes, there'd be more people complaining about me. So I followed his advice to heart. But this incident, it stuck in my mind. I didn't have any KPIs to prove that I'm doing well compared to others. I didn't have any objective outside in third-party metric that I could use to quantify myself against competition industry. And that was really the genesis of SecurityScorecard.
Well, maybe talk us through some of the metrics and the SaaS model as well, because that kind of tells us where you are now. But yeah, what are those key metrics or the numbers of metrics that you might be covering, and then how you come to that score?
Sure, of course. So there are 3 steps involved in a process of computing security scorecards. So number 1, we pick up billions and billions of different signals non-intrusively from outside. So an analogy is, if you were in real life, you walk in a neighborhood and you walk by a house, where there's a pile of newspapers piling up on a doorstep. So you could deduce that maybe the owner of a house is out of town on vacation. So similarly, for cybersecurity, we invented all kinds of ways to detect from outside in without installing anything signals across various categories: application security, endpoint security, malware, patch and misconfigurations, leaked credentials. And we built sensor technology that is scattered in over 40 different locations worldwide. And we're monitoring when infected computers are talking to command and control infrastructure. We monitor when companies do not patch vulnerabilities on time, and we do it all non-intrusively from outside. That's part one. Part two, for over 12 million companies in our data set, we rate 12 million companies, uh, we discover very rigorous and accurate attack surface, subsidiaries, subdomains, and we measure and we publish our algorithm and our precision. If you go to trustsecurity.scorecard.com, you're going to see that we have a 99% plus accuracy rate. We publish the algorithm, we publish all those KPIs.
Yeah.
And so we discover attack surface, we find the signals, and then at step three, we give a score. And by sitting on 7 years of historical data, we've correlated what type of data points are more or less predictive of susceptibility to a data breach. And we give a score, and we've backtested a model, and various insurance companies have done so as well. And we've demonstrated that companies with a bad score are 7 times more likely to get hacked than companies with a good score. And as a result, we produce all of this through UI, API, and then we can integrate our scores into various workflow tools like ServiceNow, Splunk, Archer, IBM Curator, and various others. And that's how our customers consume it.
You can almost get an instantaneous score as well if you're in that sort of.
So for 12
cohort.
million companies in a data set, the score is continuous. It's refreshed all the time. But if you type a company name, you're going to get it instantaneously for any company in that data set. If a company is not in a data set, it's going to take you about a minute. And then you still have a very rigorous, comprehensive score.
And then I think as a sort of that software as a service model, it then allows you to, or gives you a roadmap to where to go to improve that score along the way.
Yeah, so we not only give you a score, but we give you a pathway to improve your resilience. And actually, any company in the world can, for free, sign up for an account with Security Scorecard. And for free, we're going to tell that company how to improve a score to an A. What are the paths that you need to undertake to improve your resilience and become 7 times less likely to suffer a data breach?
So that brings us to mapping and frameworks. This is obviously aligned to different regulations around the world as well. So how does it do that? And sort of through the frameworks that you work with, this is automatically aligning the company or whoever's filling out that information to wherever they are and whatever markets they happen to be in?
Yeah, so we give you the scores, we give you the analytics, but we also we developed machine learning technology to map to different type of frameworks. So for example, you can take the signals and map it to PCI DSS framework for payment card industry, or you could map it to HIPAA for healthcare companies. So you could map it to GDPR or NIST or CMMC for defense contractors. So you can, or by the way, you can actually even upload your own framework, and then we're still going to map the signals we have into your own personal framework. So we've developed machine learning algorithms where by looking at the signals we pick up, positive and negative, we can tell you what are the discrepancies. For example, if one of the requirements of PCI DSS is for you to use up-to-date encryption, but we noticed that in your attack surface, one of the SSL certificates that is being served is out of date, right? Like it's expired, it's out of date, it's using a weak encryption algorithm, then clearly that contradicts the spirit of a PCI DSS framework, and it's going to be discrepancy. And that's actually one of the competitive advantages. Other folks in the industry cannot do it.
So with those frameworks, and as you say, you can align to ones that you choose. What about updates and changes to, say, regulations and frameworks along the way? Is that picking it up automatically, or you just kind of put it on a watch list and it advises you?
So whenever a framework or regulation is updated, we have a team that pays attention to it, right? And we can update a new
Got it.
framework, and then automatically we're going to map the signals onto the new framework. But we have also an R&D team, dedicated R&D team, with amazing folks who used to hunt nation-state adversaries, and they're in charge of continuously innovating and coming up and looking for signals that could be interesting and unique to our customers. And we collaborate with law enforcement quite regularly because even law enforcement needs our insights, needs our intelligence to catch the bad guys. Our mission at Security Scorecard is to make the world a safer place, right? And so that
Yeah.
means giving our access to private organizations, to law enforcement, and to nonprofits. We believe everybody in the world deserves to have a scorecard.
Well, I think as you just point out, the simplicity of the scorecard, despite the complexity behind at the back end, it does provide a lot of use cases for that. You've already kind of touched on insurance companies. One of the things we've just covered, we're just releasing our Cyber Risk Leaders magazine today, and we do have a security scorecard article in there on third-party risk management. And I think that's a key one in, say, for supply chains and looking at your suppliers, your contractors, and your supply chain sort of third parties. The other one here is obviously executive reporting, which is kind of the motivation that you were given to even start the company in the first place. Is that what you're finding globally? There's those three ones I just mentioned: insurance, executive reporting, third-party risk management. Bit of a no-brainer for most of us. Are they the main drivers? Do you still find that there's more coming through in terms of the use cases as the market applies this?
So we have three main use cases,
Yeah,
but we also continuously discover new use cases. But the three main drivers are counterparty risk, where you
yeah,
have big banks, healthcare institutions. They monitor their suppliers, business associates, M&A targets, investment targets. They integrate the alerts from our system into their workflow, and they make safer, smarter business decisions. We have companies who are saving tens of thousands of man hours and millions of dollars by automating it because they have 20. We have some companies who have 20, 30,000 plus suppliers that they deal with. There's no way that they could
yeah.
conduct manual audits of all of those suppliers. Yet, if any of those suppliers gets hacked, they're going to be in the news for the wrong reason because their customer data got stolen. And so we give them intelligence within seconds to find out which of the 30,000 plus suppliers are in the bottom 10%. And so you need to go talk to them and mitigate risk, and which ones you don't need to worry about. The second use case is you have companies report to the board. The boards are getting more educated and sophisticated about cyber. And they don't want to have CISO promises, but they want to have quantifiable KPIs that a CISO can demonstrate to prove that she's doing a good job. And so we have hundreds of CISOs reporting to their boards
Yeah.
using our metrics.
I
We have
suppose it's a good one for benchmarking too. So you might go, well, look, that's us, but then how are our competitors doing? You know, what are their expectations in the market for us? Because, you know, you don't want to be too far out in front, but you at least want to know what your competitors are doing or what the industry standard or benchmarks might be as well. I take it that's another one from a board as to
absolutely.
where they compare.
Absolutely. And how do you know that you are? How do you know that you are investing? How do you know that you're investing adequate amount of money? Like
Yeah,
for example, we have some CISOs who demonstrated their scorecard to the board, and they saw that they have patching problems, that they're lagging compared to the rest of competitors in patching cadence. And so the board allocated millions of dollars more in budget for
yeah.
solutions to help patch the systems. And the CISOs would not have been able to convince a board without the scorecards that we provided.
I was going to say, I take it you can do any company, like send, so you can do third parties without them knowing. Is that right? If they're in the
We
database?
can rate any company without their consent because it's objective, outside in, and non-intrusive. We don't need to deploy anything. You can just type a name of a company. So I could put MySec TV or
Yeah.
Goldman Sachs or Bloomberg or anybody, and you're gonna have rigorous intelligence and insights about how you're doing and how you can become safer.
Okay. Well, I've just thought of a media use case because if a company gets hacked, if I was a media organization going to do a story on that company, I might get their security scorecard first. And if they're a fail on there, and they've been breached, and it's like, well, you guys should have known, and all you had to do was go to SecurityScorecard, and you would have known what your posture was. I suppose this
Well,
leads back.
yeah, because all the indicators are there. If you remember the
Yeah,
incident with Colonial Pipeline, where the hackers infected Colonial Pipeline with ransomware and the gasoline was not being pumped, right? The prices skyrocketed. We've had indications in our technology that that many of the pipelines in the United States were not doing a great job protecting their systems. They
yeah,
were running out of date software. They've had malware infestation. So, and if you have the data, you can predict it ahead of time.
that's right. And again, you could even potentially go to the black hats using the same method and looking for those poorly postured companies as potential targets as well. And I just did my editorial. There's about 150 US utilities that have just uplifted. So there's no shortage in terms of where they are and the vulnerabilities that they're facing. Now, this leads us to the type of company that you are. You're going global. It's a software as a service model, and you're 100% through the channel as well. How's the startup journey been? You mentioned 2014, so you've been going for about 7 years, which is almost the sweet spot for a startup. It never really stops, but you must be getting your legs now. And as you're talking to us here in the Asia Pacific, you got markets around the world. How's the journey been, and what some of the learning outcomes that you've had?
Well, it's been an incredibly exciting journey because when we started the company in 2014, and you talk to people, and I would tell prospects, we're going to quantify and measure risk. Most people looked at me like I'm crazy. They would tell me, how could you measure from the outside? You're not going to know all the intricacies of what we're doing. What are security ratings? How do I know that it's accurate? How do I know that I believe it? So we had to spend a lot of time educating the market and creating a new market from scratch that has not existed. It's not easy to create markets completely from scratch.
Yep.
Now, if you fast forward into today, I tell to people within the company that this is the most exciting time to join Security Scorecard. Chapter 2 is beginning, and many of the customers who were skeptics, now they're all our customers. We have largest banks, largest insurance companies, uh, the COVID vaccine manufacturers are using Security Scorecard to protect themselves. Largest trillion-dollar plus market cap companies in the world, technology companies, are using us and really uh, treasuring the insights that we provide. We used to talk to regulators in the government once a year. Now we talk to them every day. And insurance is becoming a must-have. And all of the leading insurance providers are using Security Scorecard as a must-have input into the actuarial model. So it's been a really exciting journey. We're over 400 people, thousands of customers. We operate in 49 countries, in Europe, in Asia, in Japan, in US, Canada, and the best is really yet to come, right? Our mission is to make the world a safer place. And we envision a whole transformation of the ecosystem where we're going to transform how companies communicate risk, how boards of directors and CISOs talk to each other, how private equity companies hold their portfolio companies accountable. And, if I reflect on the lessons, I believe that companies scale subject to four parameters. So number one is you definitely have to have capital, right? Cost of capital. That's one. And we've attracted amazing investors like Sequoia, Google, Silver Lake, T. Rowe Price. So that's parameter one. Number two, um, market. That's the most important part. You could have a great idea, great team, but if you are too early or too late to the market,
Mm.
you're going to lose. So you need to get into the market at the right time. And we entered the market as everything is shifting to the cloud, as the third party risk is proliferating. And so we entered the market at the right time. Number three, great product. We are a customer first company. I'm an engineer at heart. I'm a
Yep.
product person. And so customer is the most important voice in the room. And then finally, number four, assembling the right team. And we're lucky that we assembled the best team that I ever worked with, right? Like every time as you scale, you need to have a slightly different team. So the type of people you need when you're 10 people is different versus 100 versus 400. And so we've scaled and we've assembled the best team that I've worked with in a history of a company, and we're continuing to recruit people. But that was really the trick: the team, product, and catching the market at the right time, which is what helped us grow.
Beautiful. I think that's a takeaway part of that as a startup takeaway from a founder or co-founder there 7 years in. And I think you're right. We do that a lot in terms of going too early, or then you come in too late, and things are moving so quickly now. You've really explained that exceptionally, actually, those four key points. You've also given a bit of a global perspective on where the business is as well. What's the key call to action that you find that you have with clients? We are going to be doing a webinar on third-party risk management on the 3rd of December. This is for the APAC market as well. But what do you find is your general call to action? You talked about making the world a safer place, but when you're talking to customers, do you see common pain points with them? And then what you'd find is your common call to action to them?
Sure. So I talk to a lot of CIOs, CISOs in top companies, and I see a lot of common pain points when I talk to CIOs and CISOs. So number one, everybody is struggling to keep up with complexity. The attack surface increased exponentially. Hackers have access to much more sophisticated cyber weaponry. So hackers have an upper edge, right? That's why we're seeing so much more breaches. That's kind of number one. Number two pain point that every CIO and CISO expresses to me is that there's too many solutions. There's too many vendors. There's too many startups. They don't know where to start. And even after they deploy all the systems in one place, all the solutions don't talk to each other. So you have 40, 50 different solutions. Every solution is telling you different stuff. You get a proliferation of information, but you're creating more noise. People want less noise. They want a few recommendations, but actionable ones. And finally, the third pattern that I hear consistently is that there's still a disconnect between the board, the security teams, and other executives. They all want what's best, but they don't quite understand how to work with each other. For example, if I was on your board and at the end of a board meeting, I asked you, you presented this P&L, but like, what's EBITDA? You would give me a strange look, right? Like, you're like, what do you
Yes.
mean? You're on my board, but you don't know what
You should know.
EBITDA is.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, but if I'm your board member and I ask you, what is two-factor authentication? That's perfectly okay, right?
Yeah,
But that's a problem. Board members need to be much more security literate and security educated. So that's the three patterns I see. And
very good.
the advice that I give to people is as follows. Number one, educate the board. It's just as much your responsibility to educate the board as anybody else's. Number two, be proactive instead of reactive. Don't wait until you're attacked and deploy traditional ineffective solutions like firewalls, intrusion detection systems, etc. Be proactive. Anticipate that you're going to get hacked and make it as hard for people to exfiltrate information as possible. And then finally, the third part, measure. Measure things. If
Yeah.
you're not measuring, if you don't have KPIs, you're not going to know if you're becoming better or if you're being stagnant or if you're becoming worse. So you got to start measuring things if you want to make a change.
I think the other thing that comes through a tool like this is it gives an external perspective. So it's an external party giving you a score as a say I'm a board member. They tend to listen to say an external consultant or external advisor than they would first internally. So it's going to do two things. It's going to give you a benchmark that your internal team can use to say, yep, that's what we anticipated. That's a fair score for us. That's where we think we are. Or if it's a significantly different score, working out why and those expectations. So I think it really is a handy tool either to establish your posture or to benchmark your posture in a security context. And I think, yeah, there's no going past it, really. It's a bit of a no-brainer. Now, Alexander, I did mention a webinar that we're going to be running with Scorecard, and we are going to do a deep dive and a product demo into this as well. Let me bring this up and swap that over. I think I mentioned December the 3rd. It's actually Thursday, December the 2nd. So it's 2 p.m. here in Australian Eastern Standard Daylight Saving Time. We're going to be joined by Hanyang Lau, who's the Senior Customer Success Manager for APAC. He's in Singapore, and we're going to be looking at what is your security score, and we will do a live demo. And plus, Alex, and we're going to have a key message from you. What's your key message to the audience here doing a webinar like this? They're going to do a live product demo. And we're also going to look at that third-party risk as well. So you're basically seeing what the hackers see in this context. What would be a good message to the audience looking at the live demo here in the Asia Pacific region?
Well, a good message would be try it out, right? I think that right now, if you're not using any tool to measure and quantify risk, then you're flying blind. You know how, like, if you are flying a plane in the middle of a thunderstorm, your altimeter is not working, your instruments are not working. How are you going to land the plane? So try out the tool, see what you like, see what you don't like. We're happy to talk to you about how we can help you accelerate significantly the speed of the business decisions you're making, and I'm confident you're going to find it useful.
Beautiful. Well, Alex, thank you so much for that. Very insightful. Like I said, it's a bit of a no-brainer to at least try it out and do a demo. I would be doing it on maybe some third parties as well as your own company. But with that, I've been joined by Alexander Yampolsky, the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder with SecurityScorecard there in New York. And we're discussing security ratings demystified. Alex, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Wonderful.